Well, hi, and here we are again. And in case you just couldn't guess, this is Unstoppable Mindset. Thanks for being here wherever you are. And today we're going to visit with Dr. Gary Lawrence, who is a best-selling author of a book entitled The Rejection Junky. He's a marriage and family counselor and a life coach. So as my Jewish mother would say, this is living? Anyway, sorry, Gary, I had to. But
that's okay.
Gary, welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. How are you?
Oh, Michael, thank you so much. I'm doing great. I tell everybody, if it got any better, I couldn't stand it.
I'm telling you, it's as good as it gets, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Well, tell us a little bit about you. Let's start that way.
Well, my life, of course, like many authors, my life is the whole basis of the book Rejection Junkies. And I think the best place for me to start out is tell you a little bit about my wife and I, Sylvia and I. We've been married 55 years. And oh my goodness, way back in 1967 is when we got married. And my understanding of what a husband could be or should be was absolutely zero. I tell everybody, my father never taught me how to love a wife. Now, he did teach me how to yell at a wife. He did teach me how to criticize a wife, but he never had the ability or I'm going to say the emotional maturity to teach his sons how to love a wife, nurture a wife, and praise a wife, and honor a wife. And so when we got married, a lot of our emotional baggage immediately started coming out. Now, I was the youngest of four children, and I found out early in my childhood that my father believed my mother got pregnant by another man. And so I was the unwanted child. He always called me the little bastard. And he would say to my mother, "Would you get that little bastard out of here?" And so I was raised with that name tag and that shadow on my very being. And so there was a lot of physical abuse. And so when I was 16, I took my last beating, and that's when I left home. And I'll never forget, a friend of mine hid me in the attic of his house for 2 weeks and snuck food up to me and snuck me down so I could use the bathroom. But anyway, I came out of my environment a survivor. Now, Sylvia, she was raised in the quote Christian home. They were always in church every Sunday, but she was sexually abused by her father from ages 7 to 12. And then her mother horribly physically abused her. One time, Sylvia was beaten so bad, Michael, that she literally could not walk. After the beating, she had to crawl and hide in the closet because women from the church were coming over for ladies' fellowship. And so she handled her rejection by withdrawing. She became what I called the escaper. And so we met at Bible College, Springfield, Missouri, as a matter of fact. And I'll never forget the first time I saw her, this beautiful brown-eyed, olive-skinned brunette. And I said to my roommate, I said, "Bob, you see that beautiful brunette over there?" And he said, "Yeah, what about her?" And I said, "I'm going to ask her out for a date. As a matter of fact, I'll probably end up marrying her." Well, 4 months later, we were married. Now, here's where the rejection really came to the surface. She had been sexually abused. That was the family secret. I was not aware of it at all. And of course, that carried over into our personal and intimate life. And I'll never forget, it was about 3 months after we were married. I came home from a trip. I used to speak quite often, and took a shower, got something to eat, got in bed, began to snuggle her. And she literally jumped out of bed, Michael, so fast she slammed herself against the wall. And for the next 4 hours, she sat on the floor with her knees drawn up to her chest saying, "You can't touch me like that. Don't tell my daddy what you're doing. He said, don't ever let another man touch me like that." And so for the next 4 hours, she was literally out of her mind. That was my introduction to her past. So needless to say, the next 10 to 12 years, the early years of our marriage, were horrible. They were not happy years. And here's what's sad, Michael. I had become a pastor of a large church, a fast-growing church, and I would greet people on Sunday and say, "Hey, good morning. God bless you. How you doing? Good to see you here." But my home life was in shatters. And so we had gone, I had called several different Christian organizations for counseling, And all I ever heard was, well, pray about it, get closer to God. Well, you need to be in church more. And it was nothing but religious performance. I was not getting any answers. And Sylvia had come to the place where she had decided the best thing she could do was to leave me, leave the boys with me, because at least I could take care of them. And that's when I broke down. I said, Sylvia, if we believe the Bible has all the answers, I am going to find out what is causing this. I did not get married to get divorced. And that's when I began to do a study about rejection in the scriptures. And then I began to apply it in a practical way to our human interactions. And that's when I uncovered what I believe, and that's in my book, Rejection Junkies, I believe is the hidden addiction that everyone suffers. But here's the good news. Everybody can overcome that addiction. Does that make sense?
It does. So what did you do, or what did you discover in the scriptures, and what did you do to start to deal with this concept of rejection and the fact that she was clearly a person who had experienced rejection in her own way, and now she was, in a sense, passing that on to you?
Right. Well, and that takes me back to our wedding. What I didn't understand is, and I say this to everybody that I coach, the rejection patterns of our past begin to seep up through the floorboards of life rather quickly, probably within the first 3 to 6 months of a marriage relationship. And see, I became the survivor. She became the escaper. Well, I needed someone to dominate, and she needed someone to dominate her. And what I had to do was get off of my high horse and swallow my pride and humble myself and say, okay, Gary, it's time you learn what is going on in this human interaction between your wife and you. And when I started studying the scriptures, I was taken to the book of Hebrews, and it says in Hebrews 12:15, looking diligently, lest any man miss out on the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springing up trouble you, and thereby many be defiled. So the root of bitterness is the underlying cause of all the rejection in everybody's life. Now, you and I had a conversation, and you said you believe that everybody has a disability, and I agree with that 100%. It's just like everybody has an addiction. You show me someone that says, I don't have any addictions, I'll show you someone that has an addiction waiting for them, okay? And rejection just happens to be the most common addiction. I don't care what your education is. I don't care what your financial status is. I don't care what gender or race you are. Everybody experiences rejection. But here's what happens. Unfortunately, some people, they experience and absorb so much rejection, they unconsciously recreate it in their relationship. Okay. And when I began to understand, yes, I was outwardly angry. Yes, I was outwardly hostile. Yes, I was outwardly dominant. My wife was inwardly fearful. She was inwardly withholding her emotions. She learned the best way to deal with her emotions is not to deal with them. And so in the early years of our marriage, I'd say, why don't you talk to me? Why don't you answer me? Well, she was never allowed to express herself as a child. Many people who have the escaper mindset, the escaper pattern, there's two things they lost in their childhood. The first thing is they lost their voice. And the second thing is they lost their choice. Okay. Now, see, we'll go back to my marriage. Sylvia didn't really choose to marry me. It was about 4 months into our dating relationship. I looked at her and I said, Sylvia, I think it's time we get married. She was so passive, Michael. She looked at me and she said, well, if you think so.
Well, tell me, you talk about people becoming addicted to rejection. When does that happen for the average person?
Well, here's a fact that everybody needs to be aware of. By age 8, 80% of our emotional patterns are formed. By age 18, 100% of our self-image is formed. So you go to age 25, 35, 45, 55, the older you get, the less opportunity you have to mature emotionally. It's sad to say, but age and wisdom do not always come together. More often than not, age comes alone. Just because a person gets older doesn't mean they become wiser. Okay.
Right.
And so these rejection patterns, I'll tell you this story. I had a retired medical doctor and his wife come to me for counseling. At that time, they had been married 50 years. And he was in his early 80s. And I shared this truth with him. The older you get, the less opportunity you have to mature emotionally. And he looked at me and he said, well, Doc, what you're telling me is I'm an 80-year-old, 8-year-old. And I said, yeah. Well, his wife leaned over. Her name was Doris. His wife leaned over and patted him on the leg. And she said, see, sweetheart, I've been telling you for 50 years, you act like a little boy. And so people listening to this podcast, they may identify with what I'm saying. They may have a better education. They may have more financial security. They probably even have a few wrinkles and less hair or gray hair. But the truth is, the older we get, the addiction stays there, but it strengthens year after year after year. What's that old saying? Old habits die hard.
They do. Well, you say that there are a lot of symptoms of rejection or rejection addiction, but there are really only two types of rejection. I think you've written about that. What are the two types of rejection? Tell me more.
Well, it's really brought down to that. There's two levels of rejection. There's overt rejection, which is what I experienced, and there's covert rejection, which is what Sylvia experienced. Her father was a prisoner of war for 3.5 years, and he was on the island of Burma by the Japanese. And then when he came home, he married a very dominant, very hostile, controlling woman. And then when my wife was in 6 to 7 years of age, she was diagnosed with tuberculosis. And during that time when she was bedfast, that's when the molestation started coming. Now, I used to hate that guy because of what he did, but then I began to understand the dynamics of why he did it. He was literally neutered emotionally by that dominant, hostile, critical, controlling wife, but he found comfort with his daughter. And so it was not just a power play, it was a comfort play. And when she got married, she could not identify having a healthy sexual relationship with her husband because of what had happened when she was a child. So there's covert rejection, and then there's overt rejection. Now that's very obvious, like yelling, screaming, name calling, cursing, belittling, where the rejection is so obvious that you literally become addicted to that type of rejection. For an example, I would get so frustrated because Sylvia would not communicate with me. She would not talk to me. She was totally without emotion. And so I would become angry and say, why don't you talk to me? And then she would say, you're always mad. I'm not always mad. You're always screaming. I'm not always screaming. So here's these two adults literally reliving and recycling their childhood emotional patterns. And I'll guarantee you that goes on in just about everybody's life.
We were somewhere, I was just trying to remember, at a store. We don't go out much because of COVID and it's just safer to be home anyway, but we were somewhere last week, I think it was. And we had just parked and lowered the wheelchair ramp for Karen to get out. And there was a car next to us, and there was what was apparently a husband and wife getting out. And all of a sudden, he said, in a little different wording, he said, your rear end is so big, no wonder you don't move very fast. And what? Karen said to me, said, boy, if that isn't, and they were seniors. He said, if that isn't elder abuse, I don't know what is. And she said, this woman just walks with her head down. And you know, I hear exactly what you're saying.
Right.
And of course, as I said, and I've said before, Karen's in a wheelchair and has been in a chair her whole life. And I tell her she's got the biggest and cutest wheels in town, but but now she's in a power chair. So the wheels are all smaller. So it's kind of not the same, but
yeah. I would say that's a classic example of overt rejection, wouldn't you?
Well, I would say so. There's no question about what that guy was doing.
Right. Well, and I'll never forget one time Sylvia and I, we lived in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and we were down in El Paso, Texas. And I had become so frustrated with my inability to communicate and understand what was going on that I told Sylvia, honey, I've decided I'm going to file for divorce. I'm not mad at you. I'm not angry. I'm not upset. I just will not continue to live with an emotionally handicapped human being the rest of my life. Well, she said, but I'm not like you. And I said, what do you mean? Well, you're so angry. And I said, Sylvia, I know I'm angry and I'm outwardly hostile, but you are inwardly hurt. You've got a wounded spirit. And that's, boy, I'll tell you what, Michael, that's when the light came on. You see, the root of bitterness comes out as a wounded spirit. You show me someone that's wounded your spirit, I'll show you someone you have a root of bitterness towards. You show me someone that creates a sense of guilt, I'll show you someone you're bitter towards. Bitterness is an ugly word. People don't like to embrace that word, okay? That's not a pretty word. But here's some of my definitions, okay? Now, these are not from Webster's dictionary. These are mine. Bitterness is an inward resentment. It's a wounded spirit. Bitterness is a fear. You show me someone who has a spirit of fear, I'll show you someone that has a wounded spirit and they've lived in that root of bitterness. A sense of betrayal, a sense of anxiety. You show me someone that's always anxiety ridden, I'll show you someone that has a deep, strong root of bitterness. Bitterness is an avoidance. You show me someone you avoid being around, I'll show you someone you're bitter towards. A sense of loss, a sense of abandonment. You show me someone that you feel like you've been abandoned, and I'll show you someone you have a root of bitterness to. And that root of bitterness goes deep.
Well, you indicated that you were honest and open with your wife, and you made that comment, and you said the light went on. What happened?
Well, that's when I realized that root of bitterness, I was demonstrating it outwardly. She was demonstrating it inwardly. And when I finally understood that, I thought, what is the problem? The problem is not that I'm hostile or that she is withdrawn. The problem is not that I'm very verbal or that she's very nonverbal. The problem is we both had a root of bitterness deep in our soul.
So what did you do?
Well, in my book, Rejection Junky, on the 17th chapter, it's called The Emotional Surgery. And in that chapter alone, that's where I show you how you literally get free from that root of bitterness. I call it the emotional surgery. Now, for me to explain that in the podcast, it's just not possible to do, okay? Simply because I have to understand what a person's history is. In the coaching, the counseling process, there's a 4-hour session where I literally take a person's life history. I trace every tentacle of rejection they've experienced during that session. Once I've got that trail of rejection pretty well pinpointed, that's when I can position them to get free, to break the bondage from that root of bitterness.
So what did you do with your wife?
What did I do with my wife?
And, so at that point you had a realization.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So how did you all deal with that?
Well, that's when I developed a technique where I could get free of that root of bitterness. And I started first, and I started getting free of my root of bitterness. And then and only then was I able to focus on what her needs were and position her to start getting free from her root of bitterness. Now, just picture this. Here's two emotionally damaged people trying to live like adults, being successful as a pastor. At that time, I also had a radio program down in Missouri. And so once we got free, we began to break those patterns. Now she's on a healthy level, very verbal. On a healthy level, I am able to listen to her. and understand what's going on in her mind and her emotions. And so it just positioned both of us to become the healthy human beings that God intended us to be. We were able to overcome our addiction to the rejection patterns of the past.
And since you have been married some 55 years, I would dare say something worked.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I wish I would have known then what I know now. Don't all of us at this time of our life say that?
Yeah, yes, in one way or another.
Right. But I have got the most kind, sweet, gentle, loving, caring human being that a man could have for a wife. And I did not understand that in my youth. I was 22 years old when I got married. Sylvia was 20 years old. We were literally just kids taking on adult responsibilities, and we were not prepared nor capable of fulfilling an adult life.
But you grew. And how long did it take you to have communications breakthrough and get to the point where you all were on a positive road again?
I am so glad you asked that question. That's a great question. On that trip from El Paso back to Albuquerque, when the light came on, that's when I stopped focusing on her weaknesses and began to focus on my weaknesses and understanding what created my emotional patterns. And when the man stops focusing on his wife's needs, her emotional patterns that are negative, and he begins to look in the mirror of reality and deal with himself, that's when the marriage begins to become healthy.
So how long did it take you to get to a good place from the time you were married?
Well, I don't think it was probably in our 11th year before I began to understand all this. And so over the next 12 to 18 months, I would say that was our turnaround time. That's when I finally became a husband, not just a man that was married. And there's a major difference.
There is a major difference. Yes, I was just going to say that.
Right. Just like, there's a lot of females that give birth to babies, but that doesn't mean they're a mother. Okay. There's a lot of men who become the biological parent of a child, but that doesn't mean they're a father.
What I hear you saying overall, though, is it's about communications. And it all comes down to communications being open and self-analytical as much as anything, or introspective.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And, here's another truth I'd like to share with your audience. It's called the triunity of man. Man is a triunity. We are a body, spirit, and a soul. Now, our spirit is that part of us that relates to God. It's our God consciousness. It's that part of us that says, this is right, this is wrong, okay? Then there's the soul. Now, the soul is the residence of our mind. That's what we know to be true. It's the residence of our emotions. That's what we feel to be true. And it's the residence of our will, our ability to respond to life's circumstances. Now, here's where the problem is, Michael. When what we know and how we feel are in conflict, the will is damaged. For an example, I know God loves me. I don't feel like God loves me. I know I can do it. I don't feel like I can do it. I know my wife loves me, but I don't feel like she loves me. Excuse me. So there's that constant conflict between what we know and what we feel. I know I'm successful. I don't feel like I'm successful. So when the will is damaged, then the body suffers. Okay. For an example, I counseled in my, I retired after 23 years of my counseling practice. I counseled a lot of ladies who had anorexia or bulimia. Now, are those definitely food disorders, eating disorders? Yes. But what's the fuel? The rejection of their past. Okay. They don't, they know that they're loved, but they don't feel like they're loved. They know they can do it. They don't feel like they do it. So what do? They begin to sabotage their physical well-being until sometime the body gives up and says, okay, I'm willing, go ahead and destroy me. And then there's a point where the body says, enough is enough is enough. So it's all these physical diseases are created because of the emotional conflict in a person's life. I believe that firmly.
Well, yeah. And I think what I'm hearing you say is, again, part of the challenge that we have is that the spirit and the soul clash, and the body itself isn't contributing to fixing the solution necessarily. And so we tend to spiral down until we open ourselves and allow us to communicate inwardly.
You know what, Michael? You said that just verbatim. You should open up your own counseling practice, my friend.
Well, I've been for the past 20 and a half years talking about escaping from the World Trade Center. And as I've said before on this podcast, what I've never done is taught others how to deal with controlling their fears like I did on September 11th. And I wasn't thinking about it prior to September 11th, but I took steps and did things to learn and become knowledgeable and internalized it, how to deal with emergencies, how to deal with whatever I could regarding the World Trade Center, how to get around the World Trade Center, which for me is, of course, a little different than you because I don't read signs. But learning all of that and truly emotionally, intellectually, and physically knowing all of that provided me with a way to deal with unexpected things that came along, assuming that I could and didn't fall 78 floors to the street or something like that. But knowing all of that, as opposed to just having some tool available that, if something happens, I could look at a sign, but knowing it made a big difference in what I was able to do and how I was able to do it. And what I've learned is that I haven't ever worked to teach people much about that. So we've actually started writing a book entitled, the working title, I don't know whether it will end up as that, but I love the title. My colleague and co-author on this came up with the title of A Guide Dog's Guide to Being Brave. And it is not that the guide dog did everything, because a guide dog's job is to guide and not to lead.
Right.
But we're a team. And ultimately that's the big issue, is that we are a team. And when we work together, then we can be successful. And my knowledge as the team leader helped us work together. So we're writing a new book. We've got a contract for it. It's going to be a while before it's published, but hopefully we will be able to start to teach people about overcoming, or at least controlling, fear, because I think that fear is a very healthy thing as long as, like anything else, you use it correctly.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. There's a time and a place to have fear. That's for sure. Okay. If you're crossing the street and there's an 18-wheeler bearing down on you, it's time to have some fear. Okay. But I know I was reading about you and Roselle, and you made it a point to say that Roselle was not afraid. And because
she wasn't afraid because she was also cueing off of me.
Right. Yeah. And
but that goes both ways.
Absolutely. There you go. And so that's what began to turn mine and Sylvia's marriage relationship around, is when I positioned myself to stop living in the anger and the frustration that I had carried from my childhood. And once she began to see me deal with my root of bitterness, get free from the past, then she stepped forward and said, you know what? I can trust this guy. Okay. I believe that, as a matter of fact, Sylvia told me one time, now we've been married 55 years, so I don't remember what year this was, but she said, I didn't really love you for the first 2 years that we were married. And I looked at her, I said, you didn't? She said, no. I said, why is that? She said, because I didn't know what genuine love was. And so we began to understand what is genuine love. I began to accept her unconditionally. She began to understand. She began to understand me unconditionally, and that's when things began to turn around. Now we have 2 sons, And they are, my older son's been married 30 years. My younger son's been married 19 years. We have 7 grandchildren. We have 4 great grandchildren. And we've seen these principles passed down into our sons' lives and into their marriages. And it's just awesome once you begin to break that generational pass down to see the fruits of that come up and rise up into your grandchildren's lives and see the progress they're making. That all that confusion, that bitterness is just not present in their lives.
And it's cool that you're able to pass those kinds of things along and that you're seeing successes occur. You mentioned the 18-wheeler bearing down on you. I would say it's not so much the time to be afraid, but it is the time for you to, if you've trained yourself properly, react based on whatever is occurring. So which way do I run? Right. You can't make that decision at the time the truck is running down on you. You have to be aware of your surroundings so that you can make that decision. And it, for me, not having eyesight, it means being aware of where I am as I cross a street.
Yeah.
It means a lot of different things in terms of, in literally an instant, analyzing sound, analyzing all the information and figuring out which way to run, which may or may not work depending on how close the truck is and how big the truck is. But the hope is that, and in my case, I think it is what I do. If that truck is close enough for me to hear it really well, I'm probably not even going to start crossing the street in the first place. I think there's a time to take a risk and a time not to.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's basically 2 types of guilt, Michael. And unfortunately, most people develop their self-worth or their self-image based on what they do, not who they are. Look at the political situation in our country today. It's all about money. The more money you make, the more value you have. That's just not true. There's so much going on in our country today that is so heartbreaking. But there's 2 types of guilt. There's false guilt and there's genuine guilt. False guilt is an anxiety created from a fear of being rejected for a lack of performance. Okay, so a lot of people who are overwhelmed by that sense of guilt, they live with the constant feeling that they're not measuring up to someone else's expectations. And then you've got the genuine guilt. Now, genuine guilt is a grieving created by the Holy Spirit over a situation. Okay. For an example, when I began to understand the root of bitterness and how I was being controlled by it, I would have a genuine guilt. I would grieve over the fact that I got angry again. I lost control again. And when I began to understand the root cause of that, and I got rid of the root cause, I didn't react like that. Slowly but surely, it disappeared over time.
And the other part about that is that dealing with genuine guilt, I can understand feeling guilty. I should have done something different than I did. Right. I knew that I should have reacted differently, but I didn't think about it enough, which may very well be I had that happen to me before or something similar, and I didn't analyze it and learn from my mistake. I was at a church once, years ago. It was something called the Science of the Mind Church. So it's different now, as I recall. But one of the things that the pastor at that particular service said is, the thing about mistakes is it's not a mistake until you do something and then you realize it was wrong. You didn't typically intentionally make a mistake.
Right.
I wish that were true with all of the people in politics, but we won't make this political. But
right.
Generally speaking, a mistake is only a mistake really after the fact. The question is still what you learn from it. And one of the things we're going to talk a lot about in A Guide Dog's Guide to Being Brave is introspection, is taking time every day to think about what you did that day, especially the things that continue to bother you.
Right.
And ultimately, you may come to the conclusion, I did everything right that I could. I did everything based on what I knew. And maybe I'll learn something new from it, but I did everything that I could and it didn't turn out right. Why? And then go back and look at that. Or It turned out great. How could I have even done better? We don't analyze ourselves nearly enough and open ourselves up to God and open ourselves up to this whole concept of allowing all aspects of our being to interact with each other.
I agree with you. I'm looking forward to that book, Michael. I hope you get it published.
I am too.
Soon. Yeah.
Well, we have a contract for it. It's going to come out.
Well, often I was asked by my clients, if it takes a lifetime to develop this addiction to rejection, won't it take a long time to break the patterns of the past? And I say no. And let me give you an example. Have you ever had a boil, Michael? Boil?
Yeah.
A very, very painful experience, isn't it?
Yeah.
And, we're willing to live with that pain because we don't want to go get it lanced. Okay. Because we know that's really going to hurt. And I remember one time I had a boil and I put it off. I couldn't hardly walk because of where that boil was located. And so I finally went to the doctor and he lanced it. Now, it took a long time for that situation to develop, but it only took a few minutes for it to disappear. And so in my book, Rejection Junkies, and when I wrote this, I wrote it with the purpose of, I want people to have truth that will literally change their life. Okay. And that's in my book. The emotional surgery chapter is the most important chapter of all of it. And, one thing, one principle I've taught there's a phase of our counseling that was called rebuilding. That's where I give husbands the tools to love a wife. That's where I give wives the tools to respond to their husbands. For an example, one of the principles I teach ladies, every woman needs to stop being her husband's conscience. Why is that? Because every husband fights his conscience. Okay. And for an example, one time I came home and my wife called me at the office and she said, honey, there's no water in the house. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, there's no water. There was a man out in the front yard and he had a tool he stuck in the ground and there's just no water. Well, I forgot to pay the water bill. And so I came home and honey, I'm sorry. She said, that's okay. With no water, you have to take us out to eat. And so I took the family out to eat that night. Guess what? I got my water turned on the next morning.
Bet you did.
And she did. See, she wasn't my conscience. She was willing to go out to eat. Okay. And so one of the principles I teach is how to win by losing. And once I began to apply that principle, oh my goodness, it's amazing the joy that came into my life. How to win by losing. When I was a boy, I was raised back in Wabash, Indiana, a little small country town. And there was a creek right across from my house called Charlie Creek. And every once in a while, there'd be 7 or 8 of us boys. And there'd be 3 or 4 of us get on each side of the creek with a rope between us. And we'd have a tug of war.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole object was to pull the other team into the water. Well, the first 2 times we went in the water and I was the skinny, scrawny little guy and I was always on the front. And so I went in the water first and everybody else piled in on top of me. So I said, hey guys, listen, when my feet hit the water, I'm going to holler, let go of the rope. And you all let go of the rope because I don't want to drown again. So we're back to the tug of war. And guess what? My feet hit the water and I said, let go of the rope. And we did. And guess what happened to the other team, Michael?
They all went in the water.
No, they all fell backwards.
Oh, okay. Yeah. They were facing the water, so they fell backwards.
Right. So they were pulling on the rope. They all fell backwards. Well, we all just started laughing and cackling and howling. Ha, ha, ha. It was so funny. Now, we lost the tug of war, but we won the battle. Okay. And so there's the principle of how to win by losing. And that's a principle, I had my counseling practice for 23 years and Sylvia and I retired back in 2003 from the counseling. And we had planned our retirement and for 25 years through mutual funds and stocks. Well, it took me 6 weeks to uncover the fact that we'd already lost 65% of our retirement funds in the stock crash. Mm-hmm. And it was, this is not supposed to happen. Well, for the next 5 years, Sylvia and I lived on what we had left. We had about 35% left, and I didn't want to go out and get a job. And so anyway, our money ran out. Well, the Great Recession of 2008, 2009 hit, right?
Right.
I had no money. I had no savings. In 2009, we went through bankruptcy. That was a scary time. I was 65 years old, Michael, and we had lived a life of abundance. We had lived a good life. I wasn't used to being broke. We lost the house to foreclosure that we lived in for 18 years. And so I thought, okay, I'm losing everything, but I'm going to win. Okay. I'm going to let go of it all. I'm going to stop focusing on what I'm losing, and I'm going to start focusing on what I can create. You talk about, I love that phrase you use, the unstoppable mindset. I was 65 years old, and the only thing I had to look forward to was social insecurity. And I'll tell you what, you don't live on social insecurity, okay?
No.
And so I was introduced to this group of real estate investors, and I decided at the young age of 65, I'm going to re-educate myself, and I'm going to learn how to become a successful real estate investor. And that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years. And all that financial woe and situation, that's all history. And God has blessed us with abundance. Now, why is that? Because I was willing to lose so I could win. And so I guess I have a message for all of your listeners on your podcast. When you go through a cycle of loss, if you get refocused, you'll see a cycle of winning ahead of you.
It's also another example of what Alexander Graham Bell once said, which was, when a door closes, a window opens.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
The trick is to look for the window.
Right. When I was in my late 20s, I heard a speaker give the definition of success. And it wasn't what I was expecting at all. I thought he was going to say, if you want to succeed, do this and you'll be successful. But here was his definition of success. And I memorized it, and I refer to it frequently. If you want to succeed, all you have to do is fail, and then fail again, and then fail again, and then fail some more, and then fail again, and keep on failing until success breaks through. Because you're not a failure just because you have failed. You can only become a failure when you allow failing to become the last chapter of the book you're writing. Okay. And so when I was going through this failing time, I knew that wasn't the last chapter of my book. And I love your outreach and how you're impacting the lives of other people. You are all about helping other people learn how to be successful through their failings in life.
Failing is only a mechanism to provide a good teaching moment for moving forward.
Oh, boy, you're right. You're spot on there, Michael. Absolutely.
If we use it to learn from, and that's, of course, it. Too many people decide that failure is the last chapter.
Right.
And the ones who truly are unstoppable, if I may say that and use that term, are the people who say, okay, and it's what we talked about before, what do I learn from this? So I won't make that particular decision in the same way again. I'm not even going to use the word mistake. It's, what have I learned so I can move forward?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Zig Ziglar said that every time you fail, you've just got another lesson in success.
Right.
Yeah, big time. Zig Ziglar is one of my favorite speakers. So,
well, here's another question. We've been talking a lot about God.
Yes.
And there may very well be some people in this who go, oh, those religious people and all that again. But
right.
Does becoming a Christian or a Jewish person or a Muslim or becoming part of any organized religion really solve the problem?
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. Christians get divorced. Christians commit suicide. Christians steal. Christians lie. Muslims get divorced. And that's what I love about my book, Rejection Junky. I don't care if you're a Christian, if you're a Jew, if you're a Muslim. I don't care what denomination you go to.
If any.
I don't care if you're an atheist.
Right.
The principles in this book apply to the human being, to their mind and their emotions and their spirit.
And that's really the point, is
Right.
that the concepts are the same. The principles are the same. How we deal with them and the circumstances that we face may alter over time. I mean, what we face today is in some ways a lot different, at least it appears so to us, than maybe the issues that people faced 50 and 60 years ago.
Yeah.
I submit probably not. It's just that they look different, but still the same basic things are there and the same basic solutions are there as well.
Yeah. Well, you know, Michael, back in 2015, I had my right hip replaced. In 2016, I had my left hip replaced. So when I'd go to the grocery store, I was riding one of those carts, you know, one of those scooters.
Right.
And I was amazed how many people would look away from me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I was introduced to the rejection that people with handicaps face. So I thought, okay, I could take that as a rejection, or I can turn it into positive. And so when people would walk towards me, my scooter's going towards them, I'd look them right in the eyes. I'd say, "Hi, how you doing today?" Well, they were in a position where they had said, "Well, I'm doing great. Hi, how are you?" You've been blind since I think a couple of days after your birth. I can only imagine the rejection you've had to go through and overcome. And God used all that to bring you where you are. Now you're impacting the lives of thousands of people. And now a year ago, in January of 2021, I had a stroke. I went to bed healthy and happy. About 3:00 that morning, I woke up and I couldn't see and I couldn't walk. And so I was in the hospital, Mayo Hospital, for 3 or 4 days. I went to rehab, and it was a time that was humbling and humiliating. It was humbling in the fact that I had to come face to face with my mortality, but it was humiliating in the fact that all dignity was gone. You have no control over your life at all. And so I decided, one day I woke up, and outside of my rehab room, I had a window, and the only view I had, Michael, was a brick wall. Now, that's not a very pretty view in the morning, okay? But I laid there thinking, okay, God, I've got another brick wall. I've got to find some way to get over this brick wall. And so, I'm going to find some way to go around it, over it, or under it. I will get my life back, Lord. I will continue to live. And so I'm using that as a time in my life of having that mindset that I can continue to grow. And there's so many people, Michael, I'm not going to ask you how old you are. I suspect you're probably a little bit younger than me, but so many
I've said it before. I'm 72.
Oh, okay. All right, good. Well, you're just the new kid on the block then.
I know you're at least 39, right?
Yeah, right. Well,
too much of a Jack Benny fan.
Yeah. In my journey with real estate investing, I've had a lot of people say, well, I'm too old to learn. I'm too old to change. And I've had a lot of people in their late 20s, early 30s say, well, I'm too young. Nobody's going to listen to me. I can't handle it. Well, it's not a matter of what can you learn or what can you not learn. It's a matter of what are you willing to do for your own personal growth. Okay.
Well, it's true that for a number of people, 25, 30, I'm too young. They're not going to listen to me. And they're absolutely right. Or I'm too old. People aren't going to pay attention to me. And they're absolutely right, as long as they keep that attitude. Yeah,
there you go. You're spot on. And I say it like this. If you quit learning, you quit living. Okay. Right. Yeah. And my heart goes out to people that have lost their vision for the future in their life and how they can continue to impact on a positive level the lives of other people.
One of the statements in Thunderdog that comes under the heading of Guide Dog Wisdom, lessons I learned from Roselle on September 11th, is don't let your sight get in the way of your vision. And people are so afraid to say to me, oh, you're blind, or you're sight impaired, or you're visually impaired. Well, visually, I don't think I'm impaired because it's not a question of looks, it's a question of vision. And I do say I'm not a great fan of even the term vision impaired, only because maybe I don't see so good, as I love to say, but I got lots of vision. But vision and eyesight are equated, so I can deal with that. But visually, I think that helps demean us. So I'll accept vision impaired from an eyesight standpoint. But you're right. People don't learn to keep their vision, or they lose their vision, which is one of the big problems that we all face if we allow ourselves to be something other than unstoppable.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if this is true or not, but I've heard it said that Helen Keller is credited for saying this. The saddest thing is for a person to have sight and no vision.
I don't know whether she said that, but it would certainly make a lot of sense. And I think it's true.
Right.
But and that's my point of don't let your sight get in the way of your vision. So many times I hear people say, well, I can see that, and this is the way it has to be. And I look at it in a different way. And you know what? Oftentimes what I need to do works the way I expect to do it too. We've got to really be open on all levels to do what we do.
Right. Well, humility is not a naturally acquired character quality. Okay. And I'll guarantee you, I have not been the most humble of men in the early years of my life. I'm not so sure that I'm the most humble of men now, not by any means. But the bottom line is people do what they want to, nothing more, nothing less. And when I came home from having my stroke, I was using a walker, and I had determined that I would be done with that walker within 7 days, and I was done with it. And why is that? Is it because I had some kind of magical power? No, it's because I had a will to create a future that I wanted to experience. And I encourage people, stop focusing on the past, get into the present so you can begin to create the future you want. Stop focusing on your circumstances that are holding you down and position yourself to create circumstances that you want in your life. You can do that. You can do it. You can do it. I don't care who you are.
So what if it didn't take 7 days, but maybe took 2 or 3 months? How would your outlook have changed?
I would have kept using that walker, saying, okay, I'm getting closer to using my legs.
There you go.
Yeah, absolutely. I would not have given up. As a matter of fact, I remember I was in rehab, and they put me up against the wall with a railing and had me walking sidestep along that wall. And I couldn't wait until I could get away from that wall and start using my walker. But I had to get my sense of balance back before I could do that.
Right.
What I started to tell you and your audience is when I got home, I told Sylvia, honey, my life isn't over. I refuse to live a life without a purpose, and God's not done with me yet. And my heart goes out to people that have given up because they've let the circumstances overwhelm them. Mm-hmm. And it's a matter of what are you going to create for yourself? Go ahead. That's why I'm so excited about being your guest on the podcast, because of the unstoppable mindset. That's what life is all about. I've had people say, well, Dr. G, when are you going to retire? Retire to what? Television? Retire to what? Sitting at home in the living room. So now when people say, when are you going to retire, Dr. G? I'll say, probably when I die. That'd be a good time.
Or maybe not.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
well, how do people develop their own sense of self-worth or their self-image?
When they get free of their bitterness from the past, when they stop living in the shadows of other people's expectations, when they buy my book, Rejection Junkies, and come to understand how they are being controlled by those early childhood emotional patterns that have been developed. And only when they understand how they're being controlled by it will they be able to break those patterns and get free from it. Now, that's my opinion. I'm sure I don't have the only answer to the situation, but in my book, Rejection Junkies, they've got my answer at that time.
Yeah. it makes sense. It is still all about, well, I'll put it in a slightly different way, but I think it really means the same. It still comes down to you making the decision that you're not going to tolerate less than you actually can do in your life. If you give up, that's helping to shape one kind of self-image. If you choose to progress and learn and move on, that's another. And I think that the latter is a much more vivid example of unstoppable, and is a positive way to go. And that's what we should do.
In my book, Rejection Junkies, I've written a poem called The Tap Dancer. Tap dancing on the tabletops of other people's lives, a rejection junkie's performance trip. That's how he thrives. He says, let me entertain you. Let me be your friend. Let me prove to all of you that liking me is in. I can do the shuffle and I can do the swing, and I'll do the boogie woogie, and for you, I'll even sing. I'll go for you. I'll do for you anything you want. I just need to gain acceptance. How's that for being blunt?
Yeah.
Michael, I have counseled some of the wealthiest people in our nation. The last 7 years of my counseling practice, I took only the high profile personalities, and my staff took the other folks that couldn't afford my rate. And so I've counseled one guy from California that was worth $110 million. And I've counseled people that had meager incomes. And I don't care if you're rich or poor. I don't care if you're black or white or purple or green. I don't care if you're a Muslim, a Catholic, a Christian, a Baptist, a Jewish person. Everybody suffers from the same conflict of being a rejection junkie. And those rejection patterns take all kinds of forms.
You think those green people are the same? I hear what you're saying. And the fact of the matter is it confronts us all. And until we decide to move beyond it, until we make that emotional breakthrough within ourselves, then we're trapped by it.
Right. Absolutely. Yes. Well, Michael, it's been such a joy to.
It has. And I've
spent this time with you.
I really enjoyed it. We should do it some more and find some more things to talk about. How can people learn about your book, get your book? How can they reach out to you? You're still counseling and so on. Do you do a lot of it virtually?
Yeah. Oh, yes. As a matter of fact, I just got my website set up about 6 months ago, and just started doing podcast guesting. As a matter of fact, you're my first podcast, so you're breaking me in, Michael.
Well, and if you need a guest, I would love to explore it. And we should look at your website and make sure it's accessible. Maybe Accessibility can help you with that.
Well, I was on Accessibility, and I'm thinking about that. There's so many things I want to talk to you about later. I think you can give me some advice on.
Sure.
Yeah. So anyway, your audience can get a hold of me. They can visit my website. It's rejectionjunkies.com.
Rejection Junkies, plural.
Yeah, JUNKIES, rejectionjunkies.com. And on the homepage, there's a quiz. Are you a rejection junkie? Take the quiz. There's no cost. There's no catches. There's about 60 different examples of different types of rejection. But in my book, there's a chapter called It Is Rejection When. There's over 250 examples of rejection, and both covert and overt. But anyway, they can submit that. And if they put their phone number in, I will give them a call, and we'll have a free 15-minute conversation. Or if they would like to just send me an email, on the homepage in the upper right corner, there's a link that says contact us. And they can just send me an email, and I'll get that message and I'll respond to them. And so that's how I'm starting out this journey. I don't have a Facebook group yet. I do have one already made up in my mind. It's called Rejection Junkies Unplugged, and it's going to be a private group. So I'm just learning the internet journey here.
And it's a fun journey. People make comments about the internet and technology and so on. Personally, I think the internet is a great treasure trove. Again, it's how we use it. But there are a lot of fun things on the internet. And yeah, there are challenges, and social media can be misused and oftentimes is, but the whole thing is a great adventure.
Yeah, it really is. And I want all of our people who are listening to us to rest assured that any contact they make with me is 100% private and confidential. And that's why I'm not eager to get on Facebook yet, or because I want my clients to feel confident that they are being protected in their communications with me.
Well, there you go. Well, I hope people will reach out. Again, the book is Rejection Junky, and the website is rejectionjunkies.com. And feel free to reach out to Gary. I love the insights. I love what you've had to say. I think you've offered us a lot to give us good thought about becoming more unstoppable. And you've proven that you and Sylvia are. One of these days, we'll get over to Phoenix and meet you.
Well, I told Sylvia, I want to meet this man in the flesh. We would love to host you. We would love to take you and Karen out for a wonderful dinner at the Capitol Grill. How's that sound?
There you go.
Yeah. Michael, thank you so much. And it's been a joy to get acquainted with you. Now, I want to say this in front of the audience. You've already been a blessing to me. You have been an encouragement to me. I've been to your website and have read some of the information. I watched a few videos on YouTube, and it's just an honor to call you my friend.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate that. And I reciprocate.
Okay.
Well, thank you all for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this. This has been wonderful, and I hope you found it wonderful as well. If you'd like to reach out, I would love to hear from you and get your thoughts. Please email me at michaelhi@accessiby.com. And you can also go to our podcast page, www.michaelhingson.com, michaelhingson.com/podcast. Whether you do it there or wherever you're listening to this podcast, please give us a 5-star rating. We appreciate it very much. And Gary, again, thanks very much for being here.
Thank you again, Michael. I appreciate it.